What if the future of work isn't about humans using AI, but agents talking to other agents, all behind the scenes while we're still deciding what coffee to order? Well, my guest today, he's the CTO of AI at Cognizant, and he's a lifelong AI practitioner who's been doing this since while the rest of us were still figuring out how to better use the internet. So today we're going to talk about multi-agent systems, not the sci-fi kind, but the very, very real and very scalable future of enterprise automation. From running AI on laptops to building trust in agentic systems, my guest today is going to give us all a glimpse into what an AI-first organisation, what that actually looks like under the hood. And yeah, we'll also cover why your data should never fall for a charming rogue agent who said, "It's Neil, let him in." We're going to cover a lot today, but enough from me. Let's get my guest onto the podcast now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell everyone listening a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Babak. I am the CTO AI for Cognizant, which means I help with AI strategy at a 300,000 plus services company that's global. I also run our AI R&D, our research lab here in San Francisco, where we do core AI research, and some of that research ends up in various different platforms that we bring to our clients. My background is in AI. I have a PhD in AI. I've been in AI since the late 80s, and that's all I've done all my career. I've only been doing AI, which has not always been as exciting as it is today.
Yeah, you were into AI before it was cool. You were one of the guys into
well,
it.
To me, it was always cool, but for the rest of the world.
And there's so much I'd love to talk with you about today, but just for the kind of work that you're doing now, can you tell everyone listening, maybe give them a quick overview of what your role is at Cognizant, but also what types of challenges are your AI team working on right now? It'd be interesting we hear so much hype and buzzwords. It'd be interesting to hear those challenges that you're actually working on right now.
Yeah, it's hard to be ahead of the game in AI these days. There's a lot of investment, a lot of very, very smart people in the field now. And a lot of progress on a daily basis. It's very hard to keep up. So being at that cutting edge takes a lot of work, which is what the research team does. I had the luck, I would say, of having worked on multi-agentic systems back in the 90s. It was a different kind of agents back then, but a lot of the principles were similar. So what we're doing right now is we believe that the future of business and enterprises is multi-agentic. And the world is very much receptive to agents doing various different tasks. We believe these agents would be talking to each other, and the fabric of an enterprise is going to consist of multiple agents representing different functions and talking to each other. So a lot of what I do beyond talking about it is actually implementing that internally within Cognizant, rolling it out and making Cognizant itself multi-agentic, but also helping our clients with that. And on the research side, obviously, when you're talking about an agent, inevitably you are ceding some control, some autonomy to an AI system that is responsible for part of your business. And so trust becomes really, really important. How do you measure trust? How do you garner trust? And how do you basically build these systems in a way that you can, for example, measure how confident the AI agent is in its own actions? And how do you, contextualize the AI agents, and how do you ground them? So there's a bunch of research areas there that are starting to, generate some innovations that we can move into our platforms to help with that trust. Last thing I'm going to say is that while AI seems to many of us as being very, very powerful, it has some fundamental limitations today. And the approach there are areas where, we can even improve it further. And those are some of the areas where we're looking at, like, how do we rethink the entire process of developing these AI systems so they're not as rigid as they are right now.
And one of the things that excited me about getting you on these podcasts is I think it was a few months ago now when we had the big furore around the arrival of DeepSeek. But I read that you said that DeepSeek is not a Sputnik moment, but more of an industry accelerator. And I've got to ask, I mean, several months later, what did you mean by that? And why did you see it as such a course correction rather than a radical breakthrough?
Yeah, there's a ton of investment going into building bigger models. And there are these scaling laws right now, anecdotal laws, I would say, that is through observation, we've seen that the larger the model and the more data you throw at it, the better it seems to be. But this correction was sort of in the other direction, which is like there are fundamental optimizations that we can make in the way we train and the way we architect these models that make them smaller and more efficient. And so maybe you don't need as much sort of processing capacity to build these systems. And that was a correction. Having said this, like while there is this sort of whole direction towards smaller, more capable models that, in my opinion, pass the threshold of usability, at least in an agent, there is still the force that goes counter to that, which says, well, okay, great. Now that it's smaller, we can actually make it even larger with those optimizations and, expect more. So those counter forces are still in action. The reason why I thought it wasn't a Sputnik moment, because it wasn't a rethinking of how we do AI. It was just an optimization. And there were optimizations that had incrementally improved on the state of the art, leading up to that. This was a large one. It was a big drop, in the need for processing capacity, but it wasn't like foundational at that level.
And you also spoke at the time about DeepSeek accelerating the democratization of AI, which feels quite exciting in some circles. So what changes are you seeing happening now that suggest AI is indeed becoming more accessible beyond those major tech giants that we see in our news feeds every day?
Yeah, well, we still have some ways to go to get to full democratization. These models, while smaller, are still pretty energy hungry. So when you think about it, like I can download a 14 billion parameter DeepSeek model, reasoning model onto my laptop and run it locally. So as opposed to, having to, buy some, subscription to a commercial model like OpenAI or Claude. And so that's great. But you still need a pretty gnarly laptop to be able to run this thing. So we still have some ways to go. But the model at 14 billion or 9 billion these days is capable enough so that I can actually extract value from it. And it's not just it's interesting, it can predict or, it can do some translation or summarization. It actually does have much more value than that. So from that perspective, and more importantly, the fact that it's open source, which means that in the case of DeepSeek, they were gracious enough to open source the entire process. So you can actually take any open source model, like any Llama model from Meta, and do the optimizations that they did as DeepSeek and retrain from scratch and create another model. That's great. That's a level of open sourcing that is very, very helpful and towards the democratization goal. Since then there have been more very interesting models that have come out that are even smaller and more powerful, and especially from China, they're open source. So this whole open source movement of allowing people access to the weights and sometimes even the process of creating these models, this is really good. It's a step in the right direction. And finally, these models have certain capabilities that manifest themselves at certain sizes, so that if it's too small, it's not powerful enough for you to be able to use it as a basis for your agents, for example, that are working on a certain part of your process or organization. But we're seeing more. There's a diversity of these models, not just from China, from France, from the US, that you can select from that are open, that you can run locally, and these are all good signs, I think. As opposed to larger and larger models that absolutely have to be running in huge data centers and they're commercially available, so you have to pay for them, and there's all sorts of issues with that. So I think both are good, but the open sourcing of these models, I think, is a step in the right direction. We still, I mean, as I said, we still are far from everyone having a GPT-4 level model on their cell phones that they carry around and run on their cell phones. I think there's still room to get there.
100% with you. And something else I always try and do on this Daily Tech podcast is demystify some things that people may see on their news feeds, but find themselves getting a little bit confused or a little bit afraid to ask what these certain buzzwords mean. And one that we keep hearing again and again at the moment is a multi-agent system. So just to clear up any mysteries here, can you define exactly what a multi-agent system is, and also why DeepSeek's optimization maybe makes these systems a little bit more viable in real-world settings now?
So let's start with what is an agent. So most of you are familiar with these models, these like GPT-4 generative AI models. And they're just that. They're a model. What does that mean? They're a transformation. You give it an input, it generates some output. It just generates output. It doesn't really do anything. And so in that sense, it's a model. DeepSeek is a model. GPT-4 is a model. It's very smart when it's actually generating output. It can, for example, do machine translation. It can write code. It can tell you a joke, maybe write poetry. And do reasoning, most importantly. But that's just in the text that it's outputting. Now, if you take that model and add some code to it, so if the model intends to make a call to a tool or retrieve some data from a database, for example, then that piece of code that complements the model realizes that the model is asking it to do something and goes and does it for them. Then that entirety becomes an agent. And so the difference in one word between an agent and a model is an agent does stuff. It does stuff, whereas the model just produces output. So if you have an agent, what's nice about an agent is you now can give it a set of a job description. Here's what you're responsible for. Here's what I expect you to do. Here's what I expect you not to do. And here's a set of tools. So you can give it a set of tools. By giving it a set of tools is, you write some code that enables the model to make calls to various different API, various different backends, apps, or retrieve some local data. Then you've basically put a knowledge worker, which is the model, in a box and given it this whole job description and allowed it to run semi-autonomously part of your process or part of your application, or be basically literally a team member in your organization. When you have one of these and you have another one, maybe in an adjacent sort of field responsible for something that is, in your organization that's related, then you can have these two agents talk to each other. And the nice thing is because all modern agents have some sort of large language model, some Gen AI behind them, they understand language. So they can actually speak to each other, not just with humans, but with one another and coordinate and sort of team up to respond to queries or commands that you give into the system or events that might happen within the system. So that's kind of the advent of these multi-agentic systems, and you can really create very large networks of these agents working with each other. It breaks the silos of your organization. It can be very efficient, and it can improve quality on a lot of what you want to do. And the reason why the DeepSeek and those types of like open source optimized models are good news is because you can actually run these agents more cost effectively and faster, and therefore you can have more of them, and you can make the agents be more granular. And when they're more granular and responsible for a smaller subset, they're more dependable. And so that is good news for multi-agentic systems for sure.
And one of the reasons I wanted to ask you that question was also just to set the scene for the fact that I recently read that Cognizant has open sourced your Neuro AI multi-agent accelerator. So tell me more about that and the decision, or why the decision was made to open source it.
Yeah, we noticed that our clients don't want to sort of bound themselves to some commercial multi-agentic or agentic platform. And they want something that is agnostic to the Gen AI that you use. So, if tomorrow something better than DeepSeek or better than GPT-4o comes out, you want to be able to keep your agentic system and kind of plug in the new large language model and make your agents more powerful. They want to be agnostic to the cloud onto which these agents are running. And we didn't see alternative platforms that allow that at scale to be able to connect and coordinate large numbers of agents across various different organizational processes. And so we had to build it ourselves. We're not a software company. We're a services company, but when we see that there's a lack of some sort of platform out there, we actually build it ourselves. And a lot of the IP from, the lab ended up in there. For example, around trustworthiness, around coordination of the agents. And the reason why we open sourced it is because we want this platform to be the de facto platform for large scale multi-agentic systems in the enterprise. So that, people can kick the tires, they can extend it. There's a community now well beyond Cognizant working on, extending and expanding the platform without being encumbered by some sort of licensing to a commercial entity that might actually pull you towards a certain class of models or software, and because multi-agent systems are so strategic to businesses, I think it's very important for them to make the right choice as to what platform they use, and kind of therefore not be encumbered by licenses and sort of own the IP. That is their differentiation. That is going to be their differentiation. So build on top of something that they can rely on. And that was some of the reasons why we open source. It's also a really good outlet for our own research. We open source a lot of our research in libraries that are available to the platform. And so you gain more and more features that come out of the lab from within the platform itself.
And you've listed a few already, but are there any other big benefits that this approach brings to clients?
Yeah, well, there's the scale, there's the coordination mechanism. An important benefit is this distinction between the model, which is opaque by nature. It's a large language model. It's not quite explainable, but it understands language and it can do reasoning and it can write code. So it is very powerful. You want to use it. But there's that, and then there's the code, which we fully control. So there's no need to be very nervous about the fact that, there's this agent, and to me, it's a black box. I have no control over it. No, we do have control over it, because between the intention of what the agent wants to do, which is the output of this opaque black box Gen AI model, and the actuation, which is going through the code, we as humans have authority over that code. We write that code. And so the platform actually makes it very explicit and allows you to make that choice of where am I going to defer to the large language model and where am I going to code. And this cuts beyond just a single agent. When you go to multiple agents, you want to be able to pass, for example, data between agents without having to be subjected to the whims, quote unquote, or hallucinations of a large language model. And I'll give you a quick example. If you're going in, Neil, and you have some data that you want to access from some database that you're not allowed to access, and it's going through multiple agents to get to that database, You don't want at some point for one of the large language models to say, you know what, it's Neil, that's fine, we'll give him that data, right? So you want the access token, Neil's access token, to be passed between agents without the LLMs having any control or agency over it, all the way to the point where the data is going to be retrieved, which is in code. And at that point saying, hey, Neil has no access to this data, has no privilege to see it, and therefore I'm not even going to retrieve it on his behalf. So those sorts of safeguards are built in and are part of, the best practices of using the platform, which makes, again, going back to the trust, makes us able to build more trustworthy systems here.
And I'm curious, from your viewpoint here, do you expect other companies to follow your lead and open source their products as well? Do you think this could be more of a bigger trend?
I hope so. I think open sourcing is good for the AI community, and we're building something that is highly customizable. So, as far as making money, it's we've always seen with these platforms that you don't quite make money off the platform. You make money off the customization of the platform. So if you have some AI breakthrough or platform breakthrough, I think it's best to actually put it out there, and large language model breakthrough. Unfortunately, in the US, we are seeing with, for example, Meta seems to be like retracting a little bit from their initial strategy of, we will open source large language models. We will be the beacon of open source. I think they're retracting. They had taken up the mantle from OpenAI, which originally decided to open source. They were the open AI, but they became commercial. We do see this, and I think that's not the right track. It's not good for business. It's not good for humanity as a whole. Openness with this powerful technology, I think, is the path to go. And we see China actually going the other way. China is, they're open sourcing their very powerful models and approaches, and sort of contributing to the AI world. Same for, other companies around the world. We do see that more than the US. So unfortunately, we do see some retraction there, but I'm a firm believer in the fact that open source is going to help with AI and its adoption.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And just to hammer home this point for everyone listening, how important do you think open source frameworks are, especially when it comes to developing the next generation of AI systems? It seems to be all about collaboration. It seems like the next natural step. But how important is that, would you say?
Especially important when it comes to AI. Especially important because the biggest recent breakthroughs have been closed source. They've been commercially, safeguarded and inaccessible. And when that happens, everyone it's to the detriment of the science. Academia right now is trying to replicate in a smaller scale some of the breakthroughs that commercial entities like OpenAI or Google and so forth have enjoyed in the past couple of years. It's hard. There's a need for a lot of data and curated data often, and there's a need for a lot of processing capacity, and access to it is not there. So the next best thing from academia, for example, or the open source community being able to replicate the entire thing is for commercial entities to actually share what they've built with the community, so we can extend and build on top of that. And also, it's good for the commercial entities as well. If you have a community that's banging at your LLMs and kicking the tires and your AI systems and finding the issues that might be in there in an open way, I think that kind of helps with trust and adoption, versus if it's closed, there's always the skepticism and second guessing of whether or not, you're using the data for some malicious intent or wrongly, or you're actually doing something with, you're actually biased in what you're producing and or the decisioning that you're making. And just simply bugs or jailbreaks and so forth, it just helps for a community to be able to have their hands on it that are beyond just the commercial entity that's building it. So generally, I think it's a good thing to open source.
Completely agree. And how would you say, or how has Cognizant, would you say, positioned itself for this shift that we're witnessing to a more efficient and modular AI? And one of the reasons I ask that is Cognizant's platforms, Neuro AI and Flowsource, all things that are described as LLM agnostic, which feels incredibly forward thinking. But why is that architectural choice so important to you?
Yeah, that shows that our thinking as large language models are starting to be commoditized.
Yeah.
And these are models that take natural language in and produce natural language or produce code. So when you think of it that way, you can replace that large language model with a more powerful one and expect it to do the same thing, maybe just better. And so from that perspective, it is a commodity, and you don't want to tie yourself into a single model. And so anything that you do as far as, especially that modularization that you mentioned, that multi-agency that you're creating, you want it to be agnostic to the large language models because the new one is going to come out. And if you've bound yourself to something that's not as powerful, maybe not as cost effective, then you're missing out. So that's very important to us. Same thing from a cloud perspective, being agnostic. Also from an entry point perspective. So a lot of these systems have unique user experience sort of characteristics and features. And so it's important for us to be able to integrate into pre-existing user experiences or user experiences that are not bound to some specific entry point. Anyone in any division within a company should be able to access and have an entry point into a multi-agentic system that represents that company. So that entry point agnosticism is also very important.
And if we do look ahead, I ask you to look into your crystal ball. How do you see the AI landscape further evolving over the next few years? And what do you think the biggest change will be? Anything that you're monitoring closely or you think might happen?
Yeah, so there is this trend to move to multi-agent systems already starting to happen. I think it will scale and you'll see larger and larger multi-agentic systems. One thing that's coming around the corner is agentic systems representing one company talking to agentic systems representing another company or representing a consumer. So while initially a lot of these systems are being developed with a human user in mind, it might be that an agent representing the human user or a different company is actually talking to this agent. And we're not ready for this. The protocols aren't there. The standards aren't there. That trust that I talked about is still not there. But the need for it is starting to happen. I was in Europe a couple of weeks ago, and a big bank was asking me, like, how do we market to an agent? And that was an interesting. I had thought that this will happen. I didn't think it would happen this quickly. That people will start thinking about how do you create an agent that is better at selling to another agent than the other competitor's agent. So we're going to move there. We're also looking at these agentic systems being able to kind of evolve themselves. So, for example, being able to create an agent where an agent is needed, or merge two agents where there's some redundancy, so that this sort of processes that are initially built on top of human processes and may have some inefficiencies and weaknesses due to that can actually evolve and become more efficient and improved in their quality. So these are just two tracks. There are many others in AI itself. Obviously, we're looking at embodied AI systems and systems that can learn and change their behavior as they go. These are some fundamental limitations in the current state of the art that we're looking into, but that might be a little farther out.
Wow, exciting times ahead. And for anybody listening, want to dig a little bit deeper on anything we talked about today, where would you like to point them to find out more information about everything we talked about and what you're working on at Cognizant?
Of course, if you come to our website, cognizant.com, Cognizant now is an AI first company. So just come to our webpage and you will very quickly see a lot of the AI work that we're doing. Stay tuned. There's going to be a huge Vibe event that we're working towards in the next couple of weeks. I think we're going to break some world records with that. And, follow us. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post a lot, a few times a week on the latest. So happy to be connected with you guys.
Oh, well, I will add links there. It sounds like you've left me with a few teasers there, so we will need to get you back on towards the end of the year. But love chatting with you today. We covered so much in a short amount of time, and I loved how you were able to demystify the world of multi-agent systems and that trend that we're seeing more and more. But thank you for sharing everything with me today. Really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So if you've ever wondered what comes after AI chatbots and dashboards, I think Babak today sketched out a roadmap where agents don't just assist, they act. And we're not just talking about replacing repetitive tasks. We're actually talking about self-evolving systems, agent-to-agent negotiations, and a world where marketing to a bot could become a valid business strategy. But I think Cognizant's open source move with their Neuro AI platform, I think that might just shift the industry away from vendor lock-in and towards collaboration. And if that's not a moment worth watching, I don't know what is. But what do you think? Especially around multi-agent systems. Are they the connective tissue for tomorrow's digital enterprises? Or are we giving away too much autonomy to the code? Drop me a message. Let's keep this conversation going. If you pop over to techtalksnetwork.com, you'll find all 8 podcasts, thousands of episodes, but most importantly, a nice, easy way of pushing a button and leaving me an audio message, as well as connecting with me on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. Spoiler alert, yep, I'm at Neil C. Hughes at everything. You should be able to find me there. But thank you to today's guest. Please send in your audio message, text messages, whatever it is, whatever's easiest for you, and I'll get back to you. But that's it for today, so thank you as always, and I'll speak with you all soon. Bye for now.